Welcome back to the deep dive. If you're looking for that shortcut to getting informed, cutting through the noise to get to what really matters, well, you found it. Today, we are really jumping around. We're hitting high-stakes diplomacy in the Middle East, then diving into a pretty intense debate about juvenile justice in Europe. And just because, we've also got a brand new sea creature named after a samurai. So, quite the mix.
It really is a diverse set of sources. We're going from, political instability and collapse to some quite surprising marine science. Our goal here is to pull out the crucial bits, connect some dots between what's happening globally in these more localized debates, and see how evidence, or sometimes lack of it, drives policy.
Okay, let's unpack this, right? First stop is Istanbul. Turkey's been hosting talks with ministers from 6 key countries: Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Jordan, Pakistan, and Indonesia. They're all trying to figure out the future of Gaza, assuming this ceasefire holds. It's into its 3rd week now.
Yeah, and Turkey's role here is central. Their foreign minister, Hakan Fidan, laid out a core principle. Palestinians should govern Palestinians. Simple as that. The international community's job, in their view, is just support institutional, diplomatic, maybe economic, but not direct rule.
Fidan actually said, quite pointedly, nobody wants to see a new system of tutelage emerge. So for you listening, that means Turkey and its partners are really pushing back against any idea of outside control over Gaza's future.
Exactly. And alongside that long-term principle, they've got immediate demands. They're saying Israel needs to stop violating the truce, these regular incidents, and guarantee humanitarian aid can actually get in without restrictions.
Okay, but the real sticking point seems to be this idea of an international stabilization force. Fidan mentioned Turkey might send troops, but only if there's progress on a UN mandate for such a force.
Right. But here's the rub. Israel's been pretty explicit, saying they don't want Turkish troops involved. They argue they need freedom to act against security threats there. So does Fidan's push for a UN mandate actually have legs? Or is it more about, diplomatic signaling, maybe for audiences back home?
That's the big question, isn't it? The gap between diplomatic maneuvering and, well, reality on the ground. President Erdogan has been a very sharp critic of Israel's actions, which makes Turkey's involvement in any force complicated from the start. So while they're trying to manage things in Gaza, we also need to look at Sudan, where the situation is just spiraling, a total collapse, really.
And the historical echoes there are chilling, especially in Darfur. Since Fasher fell to the RSF, the paramilitary group, that was between October 26th and 31st, over 36,000 people have fled just the Kordofan region. Many are heading to places like Tawila, which is already completely overwhelmed, sheltering, 650,000 displaced people?
Yeah. The head of the Red Cross, Mirjana Spoljart, called it horrific. And she explicitly said history is repeating itself in Darfur, which is, a direct reference to the RSF's roots in the Janjaweed militias responsible for the genocide back in the early 2000s. It's sobering stuff.
It really is. The UN's calling it one of the worst humanitarian crises this century. Over 150,000 killed, 14 million displaced. That scale. It just speaks volumes about maybe a failure of global attention. And now famine is a real detected threat in El Fasher and Kadugli. 20 other areas are right on the edge. Plus, the International Criminal Court is already gathering evidence, mass killings, rape, other war crimes in El Fasher.
And it's not stopping. The fighting is moving towards El Obeid in North Kordofan. That city's a key logistics hub, connecting Darfur to Khartoum, if it falls.
The humanitarian catastrophe just deepens.
Yeah.
We've seen these cycles before in Sudan, haven't we? The fact that we're talking, again, about mass killings, famine, millions displaced, it just highlights how urgently focused international pressure is needed.
Okay, one last diplomatic hotspot before we shift gears. A really sudden break. Peru cutting ties with Mexico. And it's all about asylum.
Yeah, this is a fascinating sort of textbook case. Mexico granted asylum to Peru's former Prime Minister, Betsy Chavez, who was sheltering in their embassy in Lima. Now, Chavez is under investigation back in Peru for rebellion. She's accused of being involved in that attempted coup by President Castillo back in 2022.
And Peru's reaction was immediate and very strong. Their foreign minister, Hugo de Zila, called it an unfriendly act. He accused Mexico of repeated interference, basically saying, you can't just shield someone facing such serious charges. Peru wants her to face a 25-year sentence.
It's a stark reminder. We usually see diplomatic fights over, trade or territory. But here, one country's decision to protect a political figure facing major criminal charges in her own country just completely severs the relationship. Mexico's sympathy for the jailed Castillo didn't help either, I imagine.
No, definitely deep in the rift. Okay, so moving from those heavy geopolitical currents, let's dive into something Equally challenging, but maybe more philosophical. It's a debate raging across Europe about when a child should be held criminally responsible.
And Sweden is right at the center of this right now. They're facing this really worrying surge in deadly gang violence. And the gangs are being quite cynical about it. They're actively recruiting kids under 15, precisely because under current law, those kids can't be prosecuted. It's a loophole.
So the government's response is pretty drastic, especially for Sweden. They're planning to lower the age of criminal responsibility. Not for everything, but for the most serious crimes. Murder, aggravated bombing down from 15 to 13. And they're even expanding youth prison units specifically for these 13 and 14-year-olds. Could happen as early as next summer.
Right. The government says, look, we have to close this loophole, protect the public. But there's significant pushback. Legal experts, child rights groups, they're saying, hang on, this won't actually deter crime. And worse, it could seriously undermine any chance of rehabilitation for these kids.
And this isn't just happening in Sweden, right? This is a Europe-wide conversation because the ages vary so much. You've got Ireland at 10 for serious crimes anyway, all the way up to 16 in Portugal and Luxembourg.
That's right. Huge variation. The only common thread is that all EU countries do have separate juvenile justice systems. The focus, at least on paper, is meant to be education, rehabilitation, not just punishment.
But the pressure seems to be building for tougher measures. Germany's debating going from 14 down to 12.
Yes, exactly. That's linked to a reported rise, about 11.3%, in child suspects in violent crimes this year. It's a very political reaction.
So you have this tension, rising violence pushing for immediate, tough action versus, well, what the evidence actually suggests works best long term. And that brings us to Denmark, which seems like a really crucial case study here.
It really is a very clear cautionary tale. Back in 2010, Denmark did lower the age from 15 to 14, hoping to tackle youth crime. But just 2 years later, a new government came in and reversed it completely.
2 years. Why so fast? What did they find?
Well, the studies were pretty unequivocal. They found absolutely no reduction in crime among 14-year-olds after the change, zero deterrent effect. But more than that, they found actual evidence that locking up kids that young increased their chances of reoffending later on.
Wow. So it was actively counterproductive.
Precisely. Incarcerating a child that early, it seems, doesn't just fail to deter crime, it actively harms their development, makes them more likely to get stuck in the system. And this isn't just Denmark. There's tons of U.S. research showing the same thing: negative long-term impacts of early juvenile incarceration, higher adult crime rates, lower lifetime earnings.
The works.
So the data seems pretty clear. The politically popular move, get tough, lower the age, actually seems to backfire in the long run. It really highlights that tension, doesn't it? Trading what we know works, or at least what doesn't work, for something that feels like decisive action in the moment. Okay, let's completely change pace for a moment. A little palate cleanser from the natural world. Scientists off Japan have found a whole new species of Portuguese Man O'War. Yeah, and the cool thing, biologically, these aren't actually jellyfish, right? They're siphonophores, which means they're like a colony of tiny individual organisms, zooids, all genetically identical, but they function together as one creature. Kind of fascinating.
And the name is brilliant. Physalia mikazuki, the crescent helmet man O'War. That's named after this famous 16th century samurai Date Masamune, the one-eyed dragon of Shu. Apparently his helmet had this distinct crescent moon shape.
Huh. It's memorable. You have to give them that. Better than something generic.
Naming something potentially deadly after a warlord feels, I don't know, appropriate somehow.
It does. And there's a climate angle here, too, potentially. The researchers think this species got so far north, first time it's been recorded there, by riding the Kuroshio current, which is a warm, strong current. And simulations suggest this unusual journey might be linked to higher ocean surface temperatures, warming seas, pushing species into new areas.
Interesting. Okay, let's wrap up with just a few quick updates from the news moments of response and risk.
First, a shout out to a train driver, Andrew Johnson, former Royal Navy officer. His quick thinking during an alarm seems to have made a real difference. An alarm went off, he contacted control, got the train diverted from the fast track to the slow track.
Right, and that meant the train could stop right at Huntington Station, giving emergency services immediate, easy access. Just shows how training and quick decisions matter under pressure. Real presence of mind.
Then some tragic news out of Nepal. An avalanche hit the base camp at Mount Yalung Ri. That's at 4,900 meters. 7 climbers were killed. Nepali guides and reports suggest possibly 1 French national.
And Yalung Ri is often seen as a peak for sort of beginner climbers, isn't it? A sad reminder of the risks, even on supposedly less technical mountains.
Indeed. Very unpredictable environment.
And finally, a bit of a legal turnabout. A pregnant British teenager, Bella Cully, 19 years old. She was facing drug trafficking charges in Georgia, USA.
Yeah, she'd been arrested after they found, what was it, 12 kilos of marijuana and 2 kilos of hashish in her luggage, facing serious time. But she's actually been freed from jail. Seems there was a last-minute change to a plea bargain which allowed her to be released and head home.
Quite the ordeal avoided there. Hashtag #Consideratro. So, quite a journey today. We started with those high-level talks in Turkey about Gaza's future, then jumped to Peru and Mexico, severing ties over asylum. We spent time on that really critical debate in Europe about juvenile justice, especially that really stark lesson from Denmark about lowering the age of criminal responsibility. And yeah, we even met a new siphonophore named after a samurai warlord. It's been a busy deep dive.
It has. And if you try to pull a thread through all of this, what does it all mean? Well, I think a core challenge we keep seeing is this tension. It's the tension between dealing with immediate problems like gang violence or stabilizing a conflict zone and implementing strategies that actually work in the long run. Think about Denmark reversing courts on juvenile justice because the evidence showed locking up kids younger backfired. That's a long-term view. Compare that to, say, Peru instantly cutting ties with Mexico. That's a much more immediate, perhaps politically driven reaction. We see societies wrestling with balancing immediate security needs against deeper long-term stability.
Yeah, that pressure for the quick fix, the tough stance, it's always there in politics, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whether it's gangs or international relations.
Exactly. So thinking about those lessons, particularly from Denmark, and all the research showing early incarceration often increases reoffending, it leaves you with a question, doesn't it? If these punitive measures for young offenders often don't deliver better results and might even make things worse, what else needs to be prioritized? What kind of societal investments, in social support, better education, mental health services could actually help vulnerable kids steer clear of crime in the first place? Beyond just the rhetoric we often hear, something to think about.